Want to have faith in humans. Give me something to believe in. Earth below me, sky above me, fire within me. Brought to you by UPRN Network. I'm Trish Mo, and this is The Missing Piece. Good evening. It is Mo Monday here. We are broadcasting live on UPRN Network and 105.3 FM New Orleans. I want to thank Carnation for sponsoring this hour, first of all. And we have, and welcome back, the Rune Walker Kenn Edwards.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Yes, I'm so excited. We ran out of time last week.
I know, I'm very long-winded. Sorry.
So the Olympics started this weekend. Did you catch that?
We watched a little bit of the opening ceremonies, and my dad's been keeping me informed as to how many medals we have and all of that. So it's been interesting.
I haven't caught up with any of that, but what I did notice, well, first of all, was the cool, the opening ceremony where the torch, what do they call them? I think they're torchers.
Like the torch runner.
Torch runner, yes. They have That's the new snowflake. They called it a cauldron, and I'm like, did they just? Yes, they did. It's none of my business.
That's very witchy of them.
Right. Lighting the cauldron before the ceremony.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. Ritual is interesting, right? Like, we incorporate it so much into our daily life that most people watching that wouldn't really look at it and go, oh, that's ceremony or that's ritual. It's like, oh, it's the opening. But really, they're invoking all of these energy and all this power and unity and peace and competition. And we don't necessarily see it as that, but they set intention. There was a lot of intention set during that, and it was a global intention, which was really kind of cool.
And I know one of them, I don't, it's always a secret who gets to light that, and they never really, nobody ever knows ahead of time, but I did read where one of them, or maybe both of them, were participating in the Nordic, like one of the ski events or something. I was like, oh, that's even better. Like, that's great. Yes.
Yeah. No. Yeah. It's I think we all see ourselves as being separate and different from everyone else, especially if there are culture around the world, but if you lived in the Northern Hemisphere, especially in the far north, I don't care who you are, your people learned how to hunt in the snow. They learned how to survive in the snow in the winter. And it doesn't matter where you came from. We all have that relationship with the earth, and we can honor that in each other and not have to think we're different.
Absolutely. Well, that was one thing I miss. I grew up watching the Olympics, and I love the connectedness of everyone coming together in a friendly and competition, and it's good. It's good, I think, still for kids too, to give that. I remember we used to, dress up in little leotards and stuff during, the gymnastics competitions and the ice skating and everything. And those were the people that we looked up to, all these positive, influence athletes. And so it's one thing that I think we've gotten away from, in the world. But
I think, I agree. I think, man, I loved watching the ice skating. That was my favorite one to watch because it's so beautiful and artistic. And not that the other sports aren't, but it was just, growing up,
that was my favorite winter sport.
Yep. Yep. I think there's something, there's really something interesting about how we view competition now. And it can be very detrimental to us, instead of just like, you don't have to be as good as the other people, but you know what? Be as good as you can be, and then you compete. And if you're better in that day and moment, because we all have our days and moments where we're good and when we're not so good, then great. Then you win. But there's there's a spirit of competition and a spirit of mastering skill. I think that's what it is mastering the skill that we've gotten away from when we just think about it as winning or losing.
I think many times, which brings me to your story too. Sometimes you have to lose to gain, because it's those, in school when I was in track or any type of competitive sport, I learned so much more, and it gave me more inspiration to keep going and to run another race, on the ones that I lost probably. So, and it's very humbling. So
Absolutely.
that brings me to your story, your life
Yes.
story. We spoke of your relation, I guess, connection to the runes and growing up in Utah
Yep.
last week. And Friday was World Cancer Day. And so that is, I'm interested in hearing this as far as your battle and survival with that. So I
Okay.
guess go back to, I guess, the beginning, where that all
Yeah.
started.
So, probably, not probably, it was. Samhain, so Halloween. For those people who don't know, of 2019, I sold. My business partners and I sold our metaphysical store here in Utah, and we all moved to Oregon, back to Oregon, and it was like that was my cutoff time. Like that was I'm gonna do my life differently. So I had already kind of set the intention of like I'm really gonna focus on the path of a shaman. I'm going to focus on developing and continuing to develop my psychic abilities and all of the other gifts that had kind of were opening up. And I wanted to live my life with that being the focus. And so I moved, and I lived there for November, December, January, February. Yeah, like 4.5 months. And then, right, COVID hit in March of 2020, right? So my mom unexpectedly died at the beginning of March of 2020. And
Oh, wow.
yeah, or I think it was COVID, but back then they didn't have a test. So her funeral was like the weekend before everything out west got shut down.
I was going to say that was mid-March, wasn't it? That
Oh, yeah.
shut down.
Yep. Right there. So to back up a little bit, I had found the Northern Traditions Shamanic Guild, which I had applied to be an apprentice for. I had filled out the paperwork and I hadn't quite sent it in yet. And I thought, well, I don't know if it's the right time. I don't know. Let's just wait and see. So I had the paperwork, I had it filled out. My mom passes away, and my my dad now is all alone, and so I decided to move back to Utah. Came back in April of 2020, and then decided, you know what, my mom's death has really kind of changed things, and because I knew it was coming, uh, I knew it was coming, and it changed everything, right? Knowing changes things, but it doesn't necessarily change what you're going to do about it. But
Right.
so at that point, I filled out the rest of my paperwork and sent off my application to become an apprentice. And for a couple of years, I'd had this very small, like white dot thing on the bottom of my tongue, and it never bothered me. I just knew it was there. And the dental hygienist even said, there's something here. I'm going to have the dentist take a look at it. And he never said anything about it, so I didn't worry about it. Well, I thought, she said it kind of looks like a calcium buildup. So I thought, well, if it's a calcium buildup, I can brush it. So I brushed it, and it hurt like a son of a gun. It became very angry. And I thought, okay, if this doesn't go down in a couple of weeks, I probably need to get it looked at, because probably a good 10 years, more than 10 years ago, I had my chewing tobacco habit. That was so long ago. And I thought, if anything, it could be cancer. So it didn't go away. I finally got into a doctor who immediately said, I'm referring you because I'm pretty sure that's cancer. A week later, so this was like October 7th of 2020, which is my sister's birthday. I found out, I went to the oral surgeon. He's like, I'm not even going to touch you. I'm going to refer you to this person who's the best in the state. Here you go. So at that point, I hadn't told anyone. Because what do you tell people? I have cancer.
Right.
So then they have a whole bunch of questions and you don't really know how to answer the questions because you don't have the answers. So for me, it prompted me to start the podcast. No One Has Time for Death. And it was, in the beginning, it's an anonymous podcast. It was all about like what I was going through. I didn't tell anyone I was doing it. I just put it out there as kind of therapy for me, a way to express it and talk about it. And a week later, I met with the doctor and he said, yes, that's what it is. So at that point, because it was my tongue and I have 3 podcasts and I also sing, like I got freaked out. Like
I didn't know you sang.
Yeah, it freaked me out. So I also, like, at that point, I started a TikTok where it was just me singing. Like, I didn't care who saw it. It was just me having this ability to sing because he didn't know exactly how much of my tongue they would have to remove. He didn't know how far it had progressed, if it had moved into my lymph nodes. There's no way of knowing until you get in there. So a week before Thanksgiving 2020, which kind of was strategic, right? Like I didn't want to gain a whole bunch of weight over the holidays. So let's have surgery right before so I don't eat a ton. And I know it was completely strategic.
I believe it.
I was like, I can't get any chubbier. So he went in and we didn't know. The plan was to take out lymph nodes in my neck and biopsy those. So I have like someone slit my throat from here to here.
Oh, wow.
And we took out 37 lymph nodes. And he ended up taking
I didn't even know
20% of my tongue. Yeah, you have a ton, because that's because I'm a doctor. I'm going to try and explain it in my I'm not a doctor because I'm not language. They're the ones that catch all of your gross toxins and stuff and get rid of them, right? So it will move into these lymph nodes, and if it's moving. So had the surgery, took out 20% of my tongue on the left front side. Had to have the lymph nodes taken out. Luckily, like clean edges on my tongue and nothing in my lymph nodes. So I have to still go back every 3 months to get a physical, or sometimes we do scans to make sure the cancer hasn't come back. So I had to go through probably 6 to 8 weeks of speech therapy.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, my speech has come a long way since then. My tongue wants to pull to the left because of scar tissue. So it takes a minute to it took me a minute to kind of refigure things out. So, all right. So now that's that part. You ready?
So I do have a question. Are you still doing those specific podcasts, like the original? You said, what was the first one?
So
anonymous.
No One Has Time for Death.
No One Has Time for Death.
I stopped. That's available on wherever you can get your podcast. No One Has Time for Death, and that one is still available. I'm not doing it. I was kind of every time I went for an update, like, how am I feeling? How am I doing? Um, and God, the biggest thing I'm learning that I go through right now is I'm okay for 2 months, and then it comes time for, okay, my appointment's in a month, and then it just becomes something it's in the back of my mind. I'm thinking about, um, it's a very interesting exercise in staying present and not allowing things to kind of take over and take hold, things that are out of my control. I don't drink and I don't use tobacco anymore, because my doctor told me it would be really, um, in his experience, which is this is pretty much all he does is oral cancer, is my chances of it coming back go up over 600% if I use tobacco and alcohol. So I'm kind of sober from all of that. And so it was interesting, to start the process of kind of being an apprentice in Northern traditions, uh, shamanic way, and now, like, we're gonna take part of your tongue, and we're
Right.
going to go through this process, right? Like, I believe, I think the guest in the show before us was Paul. He talked about his wife, being abducted, and that's how she became psychic. And I know you and I've spoken, and you've had near death and death experiences, and that's one thing that tends to happen with beings from who aren't human. We have to be able to appropriately communicate and walk between worlds. We sometimes need to have a systems upgrade and then a programming upgrade,
Right.
right? It's simply put, but that's kind of what has to happen. Um, and to be able to do the things that we do now, to be able to, you know, speak to beings who are non corporeal, we have to have those upgrades. Um, and yeah, so like this kind of process of death is something that I still go through. My so when I was finding out I had cancer, my dad also had melanoma cancer, but we didn't know until uh, March of
Oh, wow.
2021. So
And
my
your
first
mom.
and my mom just
There's
died.
all these tragic trauma.
Yep,
Um,
yep. And if
in your
like
life.
shake it to the core, we're gonna shake you to the freaking core, man. And here you go. Mom's gone, dad can go. Like we're gonna take your whole life and shake it up. But I kind of knew. Well, I knew it was possible. I knew that was something that could happen. Um, I don't know. We never know that it's to the extreme that it ends up being. Um, so then all last summer, I spent going with my dad to all of his cancer appointments and taking care of him and making sure that he did everything he needed to do. And luckily, we live near somewhere near the Huntsman Cancer Institute, and they were doing a study on a drug, and it actually got rid of his type of melanoma. It's very specific. Got rid of it. They still removed the skin where it was, and he's doing great now. Um, and yeah, like it's the process of dying and death to be able to release you to be able
Mm.
to do new things is in most cultures that have a shamanic type
Yeah.
person in their culture, right? And so it was very interesting it is still interesting to go through because I haven't even hit the 2 year mark. And in the middle of all that, I always tell people you can't make this stuff up because it either happens or it doesn't. But the we had you I lived in a town of 300 to 500 people. The lady who lived like just down the street from us ended up having the same cancer as I did, which is squamous cell carcinoma.
Wow.
And in the whole process of she was diagnosed in January of 2020, and she has since passed away.
Oh,
So I feel lucky that mine was caught when it was. um, and to like to be going through so many different types of death
Mm-hmm.
in all of that moment was a really interesting. That's my go-to word, by the way, when I want to swear. It's a really interesting
Interesting.
um, thing to go through, you know, as a prompting and as an initiatory right into like a shamanic path.
And I always believe that, you know, especially for those of us that just aren't learning and aren't moving any other way in life. I mean, even if we think we are, and the universe is
Hmm.
makes your life so uncomfortable with, you know, either with tower after tower events happening, you know,
Yep.
one thing after another, until you have no choice but to get up and move, you know.
Yep.
And that's what's amazing about stories like yours, because we had a shaman on Chasing Prophecy a
Hmm.
while back that said the same thing. He's like, well, no wonder you haven't been doing what you're called to do, Trish. That's why you keep getting slapped over and over by the universe, you know, like. And
It's true.
we go through these and you know, we do the same. I'm sure our parents thought the same thing about us, as you know, the universe is technically our parents, and then our literal parents, biological parents in this life, and then we do the
Yeah.
same thing to our children and our pets and everything else, and we're like, why do they keep doing the same thing over and over? When are they going to learn?
When will they? Yeah. When will they listen to me? When will they listen to me? When will they learn? Come on.
Right. So, the
Yeah.
whole transformation though process is
I yeah. It's
crazy.
crazy.
It's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you? I've often thought this with things like cancer, and you know, I had Lyme disease and another immune
Yeah.
suppressant disease. Do you think, especially being on the healer path and as a shaman and things like that, that I mean, I've thought this most of my life, that cancer and things like that are an actual buildup of the toxic things in our life, whether it be our literal, you know, environment, our relationships, our work, our all of those things cause something like that, or addictions, anything.
Mhm. Yeah, I completely agree. I think so. You know, we lack big picture. Sometimes we think we see the big picture, but we have no idea that um, something I did for 6 years in the past um, would be the one thing that would be used not against me because it's used for me and for my benefit. But you know, we can't escape those things. Like I think really, so specifically for me, I believe that my relationship with my breath, my relationship with my ability to create via my speech,
Mm-hmm.
is exactly what I needed to be like, hey, sucker, bam. Like, listen, this is where we're going to start. We're going to start with your mouth because you don't think about what you say and you don't understand the power you have to create and to destroy with your breath, with your relationship with breath. You're wasting your breath. Come on, let's figure this out. So it's been a really interesting look into that. And yeah, I do believe that eh, I've been this is I apologize for how this sounds. I've been inside some people and doing energy healing, and the way it's shown to me is a little different. But I can see, like, I get inside and I can see inside their cave that is their body, and I can see where things are built up or where things are lacking or
Mm-hmm.
where we're not really putting any energy and healing into it, love, especially for ourselves, or we're not listening to it. And those places look really dark and black, and their buildup. You know, anything in your hips and legs traditionally, for me, is stability. It's family, it's, money, all of those things. And if you don't have stability as a child, you're going to really develop hip issues. Um,
Yeah.
and so, yeah, I absolutely agree with you that unfortunately our body is the thing that catches it and has to deal with it. I spoke to somebody earlier today. I did a reading, and for a young woman, and she said to me, I said, "Well, what do you want to do?" And she's like, "Well, my body has kind of told me we're taking a break right now." And I'm like, "Oh, really? Did it?" And she explained what was happening, and she knew immediately. She's like, "I know I was going too hard and too fast, and I was trying to do too much, and my body now says stop." And now I have a little bit of an immune issue, and blah, she gave me a list of things, and I was like,
Yeah.
"Yeah, you have to start listening to, this is our one tool to
Yeah.
interact with the physical world. You have to take care of it." Yeah.
That's the same thing that happened, with Lyme disease. What makes me, I'll be in remission, and what causes me to go back into that illness state is doing too much and not listening to
Mhm.
myself. So it's kind of like it's a bittersweet. By
Absolutely.
default, I have to
Yep.
stop. So
Yeah. Yes. We talked about, I have a, uh, I love when I go, "Oh, I can do that once a week. That'll be great. Yes, I can." And then I remember I have everything else I've added to that, like before. And I'm like, "Oh, gosh, dang it. Like now I don't have any free time." And then things begin to suffer,
yeah,
because I'm slacking and don't have the energy to do it. And so I've learned a couple things to work that out. Like, some podcasts we record 4 or 5 episodes at a time, and then I don't have to, the only thing I have to worry about is getting it out. Like, I don't have to come up with the energy to actually interview and do all that stuff on a weekly basis, especially if I know that my physical cycle is that, like, for instance, right around the full moon, I will not sleep very well, so I can't do stuff around the full moon. During the day a lot, I try not to schedule myself a ton because I know I'm going to be too physically tired. It won't work.
right.
So, like, knowing yourself and listening to your body in those rhythms is very helpful when it comes to, us being successful and not thinking that we're failures because we can't get something to work when it really wasn't going to work in that moment anyway.
I find it interesting that you lost your ability to speak, and for a while, considering you were a singer. But did you know, I believe it's in Hindu, the definition, the meaning for the literal term for the word sing is to basically to speak the truth, the
Oh,
unspoken truth. So
that's
um,
cool.
yeah, so that's interesting. I, as a redhead, one of my favorite, growing up when I was little, I always got teased for being a redhead, but the Little Mermaid, when I was little,
Hmm.
was one of my idols. And so my spirit guides my entire life um, have been telling me to sing, and I'm like, I don't sing. What is that? Like, like that's not a passion of mine. That's not something. So
Yeah.
I looked it up one day, and I was like, oh, that makes sense, to speak the truth. And that doesn't necessarily mean like literal. It means being
Hmm.
authentic to yourself, living in your
Yeah.
truth.
Yep.
And so when I lost, I forgot how to talk and eat and do things like that as well, when for a while there, as well as
Mm.
I went blind and deaf as well for a while. So I literally, when I see my little hear no, see no, speak no evil, you know um,
Yeah.
I think it's so interesting because
It's
that
powerful.
often means to yourself, not necessarily to the world,
Hmm.
you know and
Yep.
which is funny. When I started this podcast, my little speak no evil statue, it's their little skeletons. That specific one broke last week, and I was like, maybe that means like I'm breaking free. It's kind of like Ariel getting her when the
The shell back.
right,
Yep.
right. Um, Now,
Wow.
I guess what did you? How different do you think your life I mean, you were already kind of on a path as a healer and stuff, but how do you think it would have impacted had that series of events not taken place?
Um, if that's a really good question. I think it my path wouldn't have deepened for sure. Like I wouldn't be as aware of certain things as I am. Um, I think one thing that happened in all of this is that when I came back to Utah, even during COVID, and probably especially during COVID, I began to rebuild my life like it was before. So we took back the store, we reopened the store. I joined the same organizations. I went back to work, and it was like I did the same. Oh, this is my favorite thing about COVID, by the way. We all try and go back to normal, and so we're trying to rebuild. We try to build our lives based upon the same model we had before. But now, because of this sounds woo woo. Because of the energetic shift that's happened, you cannot use hierarchy to rebuild things because it's actually going to fall even faster and quicker, I believe. So I tried to rebuild my life in this structure that would provide me with some stability and build my house on sure footing on stone so that it didn't move. But the problem with that is I would never have known, I wouldn't have had the experience of doing that again and watching it fall completely and realizing that I'm trying to build my life coming back, but we do have to root our lives now in a more flexible way. Like if our building, if our life that's our building isn't able to move and sway and flow, it will crash completely. We have to it's like building on water and allowing the water to kind of move you and take you, like having almost like a boat on the water. We can't be anchored into something so hard anymore. It's not going to work. It doesn't work, and we've seen it. I think we're seeing that over and over with people. I want to go back to normal, and you know what? They go back to normal, and it actually doesn't work. It still
Yeah,
keeps falling apart. For
it's
instance, yeah.
a shutdown, like you said.
Oh, complete. And there's in my one podcast, Manly Minds. It's not for everyone. I will tell you that right now. It's very. We have a lot of swear words, and my buddy and I we try and talk about. He would never say that this was what we talk about, but the toxic masculinity stuff that we've been taught, and we're trying to break through all that. Right? We can talk about our feelings. We can talk. Men don't have to be this manly thing that we've all thought about. But a couple episodes ago, we talked to a gentleman who's local who started a foundation called Life's Worth Living, and it's a suicide prevention organization. And we were talking, and and I already kind of knew this statistic, but the largest number of suicides in a demographic are middle-aged white men, and that hit hard. It hit home so hard because even the last 6 months, I've gotten to this point where I'm like, I'm tired and I'm done and I want to be done. And so it crossed my mind. I'm like, well, I'm just going to jump the planet. Like I'm getting the freak out of here. And what I came to realize is that it's my life as it is now that's not working.
Mm-hmm.
That's what needs to die. So it's not that I have to physically jump the planet. Like I don't have to die, but I do need to give up my life as it was because that's only causing me misery and pain. And I need to let it go to be able to become something new. And I think that's one of the things that I'm really looking at. And I see a lot in readings with the people that I work with. I see a lot of that coming up for people who are like, oh, 2021's over, 2022. I'm like, do you get that we just started this, right? Like
Right.
we're not done.
And so and here's what I was thinking about last week too, when everybody's freaking out that, we're having another Olympics and there's fear of going into another shutdown and all this. I'm like, well, of course. And they're saying 2020 two, TOO. I'm like, well, of course it is going to be the same if as a collective we have the same fear and the same everything that we had during the first one.
Yep.
Nothing changes if nothing changes. But
Yep.
also, my daughter and I baked a cake for Groundhog Day the other day. And
Yeah.
I started reading up and, thought about the movie. I hadn't watched it in years. And that just made me think of it even more when you were talking about wanting to jump the planet last year and stuff. And, I've gone through, so, I don't even know how many death and rebirth situations in my life over the last few years where I was the same way. I was like, I am done. I am done with this. And you just want to give up.
Yeah.
But just like in the movie, and this is what happens because we never really die and we never really lose ourselves. You're always right there. You don't lose yourself, and if you keep doing this, it'll happen in the next lifetime and the next lifetime. And even when we're alive, I've been repeating the same shit for like years, different people, different levels, different devils, whatever. The Groundhog Day, if you watch that movie with Bill Murray, where he gets to where he's really mean to people for a while. He goes through like all the phases of a relationship basically with himself. He even tries to commit suicide. He wakes back up, same day, repeats it all over again until he starts giving back and actually helping others, and which is the only thing, once we start using our gifts in a positive way opposed to negative, that's when you change things, you shift, and you feel the gratitude, which was what I was telling you the other day about, which is so important for stories like yours to be heard, because it does not, even if it only reaches one person out there, that person might be the one, that seed that saves the world someday, so and there's no way, and nobody's the same. So even if I were to research cancer and research everything you've been through and try to teach it to other people, people cannot relate to me in the same way because I haven't actually been through that like you have. So every time these things happen, there's always one person that changes my perspective. And it might be somebody just on YouTube's. It could be somebody on a commercial. It could be somebody I'm sitting next to at a bus stop that I have a 30-second conversation with. So don't ever think that your voice, is too small to be heard, because there's profound effects on things that we learn from others.
Absolutely. And I was talking to a student today, and we were talking about kind of our individual perception and how, if we're all part of the one, then we all are a piece of the puzzle. And you're an individual piece of the puzzle. All the pieces can't look the same or they won't fit together. And so understanding and really looking at like, oh, well, how does that piece fit next to mine? And it could be that because we're constantly shape shifting, right? That piece fits next to me for a while, and then my shape shifts a little bit, and theirs shifts a little bit, and that piece has to move in the puzzle. It's very much like, I used to describe it as like you would take the puzzle in from the box, and you set the box up in front of you, and you're looking at the picture, and then you're playing with the puzzle pieces, and you can kind of look at the picture and know where that piece maybe goes. But we don't have the box to look at, one, and two, we're playing with a 3-dimensional puzzle. Actually, not 3-dimensional, pardon me, like 12-dimensional puzzle. So you know what I mean? Like they shape and they shift and move, and things are constantly in flux. So it's a very fluid puzzle, and we don't really necessarily see it like that.
Absolutely. When you were talking about that, I was thinking my daughter right before this had one of those the newer fidget things of it's multiple little boxes that fit together, but then they're like magnetic and you can flip them around. So they make a new box.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's still making the same shape, if you think of the world, but reforming. So, almost like a Rubik's Cube, but you can, put the different shapes together. So,
yeah, it's great. I think we just think of, like, I was talking as well today with this one student, and we're talking about the runes. When we look at the runes and we look at their two-dimensional representation on a piece of paper, so the staves,
Mhm.
if you actually make it out of twigs or popsicle sticks or something, put it on a string and spin that little guy, our experience of it will be very different because it's now moving. And so we're looking at these things that are two-dimensional on a piece of paper, but they're really not in reality. They're
Right.
not two-dimensional. They move, they spin. They might actually not be the shape that they look like they are. They might be something completely different, but in a two-dimensional drawing, that's what we see. So I think that it's very important for us to kind of always keep looking to shift our perspective, always keep asking the questions, and not just taking someone's word for it. Like, it's your experience, it's your life, it's your body interpreting the wisdom that you already have in it and the wisdom that you encounter from others. And that's the thing that we have to master in this life, is understanding that our body and our spirit and however many parts to our soul, depending on what you believe there are, that we're all working in harmony, and that we are using all of them to have the best experience we can in this physical realm before we move it on.
Absolutely. I was even thinking, my daughter and I went out, we were hiking yesterday, and she was taking, I'm a photographer, she was taking pictures of me. But she's like, hold on, wait. She wouldn't just take it from the front. She would run to my left
Mhm.
side, my right side, behind me, take
Yeah.
it like kneeling down. And I do that as a photographer, but you don't actually think of it, When I was thinking of it from her perspective, she said, wait a minute, I've got to get all angles. And I'm like,
Hmm.
kind of like a box, like a square. Um, that's and coming from New Mexico, the Hopi prophecy of the four corners and things like that, where
Yeah.
the different tribes come together to become one. Um, that made me think. I'm like, that's absolutely true. You have to look at everything, like you said, as the bigger picture from all four corners, and she said, well, yeah, mom, you can't. It's like when we do laundry, you can't fold the fitted sheet by yourself. I'm like, ooh, that's
Hmm.
deep.
That
That's deep.
maybe that's the name of your autobiography. You,
Yes.
you can't fold a fitted sheet alone by yourself.
That's
That's a
so
great title for a book, by the way.
true. And so I start, from the mouths of children, so innocent. Sometimes we overthink things so much, and it ends
Yeah.
up being something. It's such a simple concept, but when you put it like that, you need every direction of the world. You
Hmm.
need every direction, to look back in your life during different stages. And me being
Yeah.
40, I'm like, maybe that's why I'm reflecting so much on all of these things, because
Yeah.
it's different perspectives. When you go back and you look at
Yep.
old pictures from your past, you look at like childhood, like home videos or anything like that,
Yeah.
you see it from different eyes. You see
Yeah.
it, and maybe you notice things that even in the pictures that weren't there before. So
Oh yeah. I think it's really interesting. I think for me, being 46, having um, asking all the questions. Luckily, with my mentors, ask a lot of questions and have always, and it's really helped me to keep trying to do that. But what I'm finding is the hard part, right? Is that uh, neurologically we've created all these neural pathways, and it's hard to break them and expand and be more pliable. That's why, like, I love I love the story with your daughter, because hers aren't set. They're still
right.
pliable, they're still movable, and we need that. We need the wisdom of us from having gained our experiences, but we need the pliability of spirit and of curiosity that they have. And they work well together when we can make them work together.
Absolutely. um, I think, and that's what's, again, like with something like the Olympics, that's what's so great about that too. It's in every country in the world, has the opportunity to compete. And
Yeah.
that was the same thing with COVID, and I think one of the greatest things with that being for a while there, we were all on the same level. You know, COVID didn't spare presidents or princes or anything like that. You know, everybody was susceptible to it. But at the same time, everybody also had a taste of freedom there for a moment. You know, freedom from the stresses of the world just shut down. You know, literally for a while. So it was a time to reflect and remember what you're going to do with it. And
absolutely,
I can't imagine going through on top of COVID, going through all of what you did during that time, but you've made the most of it. And I mean, that's amazing.
Thank you. It's, I don't know. I'm kind of like COVID. Really? Okay. Well, on top of all that, yeah, you're right. Like, I kind of forget. Like, I think I've just become used to like COVID, or I don't know. Maybe I'm not as well. I've never been, and you might be this way too. Like, I don't feel like, because I've speak to dead people, I'm not necessarily afraid to die. Like, there's a shift in death that you're not afraid of it as much, because you're like, okay,
I think I was more afraid to live.
Oh,
I think death taught me how to. I think spirits have taught me how to live more than anything else. You know.
Amen. Yes.
And that's, I think a lot of times that's what they do. People who listen and communicate with the other side, I think that's a lot of their purpose as well, is to teach us. And you know, it's just like us, and again, like us and kids and everything else, they don't want us to relive the same things that they've already struggled through, you know. And that's one of, that was my fear, I think. You know, yes, I know how to die. I became good at that.
Yeah. Like, I mastered that skill.
But
yeah.
But I wasn't ever living. So not in a sense that I should have been, you know, and humans are kind of, we're the only things literally on this earth that don't give back. Animals give back. You know, plants give back all the time. The earth itself gives back every single day. The universe gives back. But we're so selfish that we just want to keep everything to ourselves, you know, and that's not what those gifts are for. So
no, we were talking about a rune called Ear, or AR. It's a rune of the grave, and part of the concept of it is that when you're buried, you decompose and you go back into the earth. Well, we don't do that. So we don't do that at all. We put our little bodies in, pump them full of gross toxic things, and then stick it in an asbestos box and put it in the ground.
Yeah.
That's not living in the cycle. Like, we are absolutely not. Even in the end, like, if you were a shitty person and you got put in the ground, at least your body went back into the cycle. But now that's not happening. Luckily, I think we're starting to see some of those like green burial
yes, I was researching those. There's a big one. I'll have to get the link, in Colorado, where they plant trees. The ashes.
It's amazing. I think that is one way that we can maybe even start to give back or put ourselves back into the cycle. I think it's super interesting, like, going back to a little bit to talking about the dead. I mean, I'm going to interview you for a second. Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay. So when when I do readings and people find out that I talk to the dead, because I think when I say rune reading, they immediately think it's like tarot, and it's so much more for me. Just like any of us who are connected. So they're always wanting to be like, what does my grandma say? And I'm like, I hate repeating. She loves you and she wants what's best for you, and she's okay on the other side. Like, it feels like that's a very, unless it was something super traumatic, like, it's very, like, everyone finds peace at some point, most people on the other side. And what do you find is like your most common thread or common theme when you're talking to people who want you to talk to their dead loved ones?
So this whole public mediumship thing is actually very new to me. And I started, I would just relay messages, not that I got from spirits to the specific people, or a lot of mine came across in very tragic, like murder and things like that. Those type of spirits try to contact me.
Yep.
So then I would have to hunt down, like,
Yeah.
it could have been from halfway across the world. So I would have to, figure out where it came from and what they were trying to tell me and things like this. But most recently, which I was invited to, by the universe guiding me to XV Planis and Flood from that group, allowed me to join them at the Sally House. And I am still, the Sally House has become like such I consider it like a train station for souls, because there's so many spirits going through there. And I'm still this like blew up into spirits contacting me about truths about the Civil War, about the Holocaust. This is like so much, bigger than I could have ever imagined, and things that probably would change history, literally rewrite history. Wow. And that's the type of things. I don't do personal readings per se. I never really have. But I'm drawn to places that something very tragic or traumatic has happened. And they want something. It's like the justice, which is funny because before that, I got this tattoo on my arm, literally right before I went there, which is a Valkyrie. And those were, the death dealers, they
pick up the dead.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so I thought that was really interesting that it's kind of seeking truth, the missing piece, and which has gone back to witches. We've always been willing to burn for everything we love. So
absolutely.
Salem actually means peace, so I think that's obviously part of my heritage. So
I think that's beautiful. First of all, thank you for letting me interview you. I think that's amazing. I'm working actually on my first case where I've been asked to help find a missing person's body. And it's been a really interesting, you deal with different dynamics. Luckily, I feel like this person, when I connected with them on the other side, is at peace. But everyone here is still wanting to find, their body and have some closure with that. And so I feel like it's really interesting that yours is the opposite. You're like Dr. Phil for the dead. They're coming to you wanting like, help me fix this. And it's a really interesting balance to have that, we all can't, just because we call it psychic medium or psychic doesn't mean we all have the same thing. And it doesn't mean it all works the same way, which is what I love talking to people, anybody, about how their gifts work and watching them energetically, how it works. I think it's really beautiful, and like feeling it, because it just expands my abilities and possibilities. So thank you. I think we really have to work together sometime in person at some event. Yes, I do too. We got to find somewhere to go. Yes. Yeah.
When I started, the concept of all of this back, it was like August. And and it came together with literally everybody in my life at that time, everyone I've crossed in this journey, everyone, I actually started the whole concept of my own art studio and going through all that in April of last year.
Yeah.
And it comes full cycle, I always tell people, any goal, we always want to quit right when we're at the finish line, and it's kind of like, and there's an elephant mural on the side of my studio building. I was thinking about that the other day. I'm like, that's true, because the elephants, represent a long journey, but you learn a lot along the way. And any project or any creative endeavor, I know it's easier for women to do this, but it's kind of like pregnancy. You create life, you birth this new idea, you plant these seeds. So all these times I've wanted to give up and just stop. I'm like, oh, it's not, it doesn't matter. It's not worth it. Then I'm like, but you wouldn't, take a cake out of the oven before it's done. You wouldn't, you can't just, when I had my kids, I couldn't just 5 months along be like, oh, okay, you're done. Like, I give up.
Get out.
So, so I always thought of like horror movies and stuff like that. Like, I'm like, we're all technically serial killers in our own lives. How many dreams are you killing? How many people, relationships, whatever, are you sabotaging? Not literally killing. No, I'm not suggesting that at all, but
figuratively.
What are you sabotaging in your life? Instead, when you flip the script, and I always tell people this was one of the biggest things. I haven't seen the movie in 20 years, but Hellraiser, and he's holding the gift, the box. I actually got that poster. I should hang it up. And he says, angels to some, demons to other, because it's how you look at it, just as your cancer, anything, death, anything.
Yeah.
And the gift, yes. It could be a curse if you look at it that way, or it could be a blessing. It could have been the greatest thing that you had to lose to gain in your entire life,
Yeah.
And so that's how I started seeing all of these things, that maybe we're the ones haunting the dead, for that matter. Like, so
I think we torture them a lot.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I don't know. When people come to me, I never really invite them in, because usually we're talking about changes in their life that they want to make, and it's not necessarily about the dead. But I try not to be like, hey, come over, let's talk. Like, they're busy. Oh, sorry. They're busy enjoying their life, sipping margaritas by the pool on the other side.
Yeah.
Like, they're, like, we're all here to experience it for ourselves and to experience it together, individually together.
Yeah,
maybe is a good way to put it.
And but at the same time, everything affects everything else. We talked about that last week, how humans are very selfish in that aspect, of where we think the entire world revolves around us. But here, plants, animals, insects, trees, they're all doing their own thing. They're all living their own lives, and it comes down to a very simple, with people as well. If you just worry about yourself instead of everything else in the world, and what you can do to improve yourself, what can make you better than yesterday, and what you can give back, then I think even to spirits, everybody thinks about what they can give them and how are they going to scare them. And they always ask me as me, and they're like, Trish, you can go somewhere and catch proof of ghosts and spirits and everything else existing in half an hour. I mean, 2 hours of your life, whatever.
Yeah.
And they spend days, some research and stuff, weeks. It's because I'm not looking for it. I don't have an expectation that it should give me something. It's not there for my entertainment.
No, no, it's not. It's so our metaphysical shop that we used to have was part of Asylum 49, which is a big old hospital that's very popular here. It's been on several of the ghost hunting shows. And um,
Is that in Utah?
yeah, when we set up shop in there, like we set it energetically is like, this is a place of healing for everybody, corporeal, non-corporeal, like, and it shifted the
Mhm.
concept of it. But like, there were times where I would be recording podcasts in there, and I'm listening to it back, and I'm like, oh, yep, there's an EVP. Yep, there's an EVP. And I wasn't even trying, because I'm talking
Yeah.
to somebody, like I'm talking to you, trying to record something, and all of a sudden there's like someone coming in with a little, like, that just happened. That was weird. With a little voice, and I'm like, okay. I would take those little, take them out and save them as a little individual file, because I didn't mean to do it. It just, I'm just going about my life, and so are they.
Yeah.
And it just so happened that we had a moment together, and I could hear them, and they could probably hear me, and they probably wish I would just be quiet. They're
Yeah.
like, oh my God, you're still talking.
And that's, that's, I see these with so many different places, and I love to hear stories about the owners of haunted buildings or houses or whatever. I mean, yes, sometimes places and the energy and the trauma that's happened there is so bad that you do have to just tear it down or burn it down, or and a lot of times, I people who have house fires and stuff, I'm like, that's your opportunity, especially in Kansas, they burn the prairie grass
Yep.
because it helps with new growth,
Mm-hmm.
and all the livestock and all the animals on the prairie
Yeah.
benefit from the new growth after they
Yep.
burn the old. So um, there's some haunted places that have such bad energy, and bad things that it does just need to be torn down. But then there
Yeah.
are others that I believe, we could do a lot better instead of turning them into basically a fear factory or a haunted house, or,
Amusement
a
park.
circus to be,
Yeah.
they're suffering, entertain people. Um, More places, it's just like a house. Houses have energy. When you start fixing it up, the energy changes, it shifts, which is like the earth,
Absolutely.
It's-
Yeah. Yeah. And we forget, oh, this is my house I'm moving into. Well, uh, there were a lot of other probably beings that lived there before you.
right.
um,
Yeah.
and if someone's pissed off or mad, like, instead of, and I don't necessarily love, I don't not love doing house cleansings, but when I go in to do them, I'm like, okay, so, okay, who just needs to have someone to speak to them to help them get what they need, so that they kind of stop, that they're happy in the space again. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? So most of the time, these beings that we can't see, that start quote unquote wreaking havoc for new homeowners or whatever, like, they need to be settled as well, and they need to be satiated, and they have needs sometimes. And so, whether it be a land spirit, a land white, or like a ghost or whatever, like, we're so like oblivious to most of the time. We're like blindly walking around like, oh, I don't care, I don't, no, nothing's there, I'm just gonna, like, throw my trash on the ground in the forest. Well, no,
Yes. No.
you can't do that. you know
No.
you can, but you shouldn't.
And then they wonder, why something bad happens, or why, and I'm like, it's 100%. And so many people who have had near death experiences have stated this, that they
Yeah.
have been explained in that death state how much impact your thoughts and your energy, the energy you put out to the world, has on everything else. Even
Yeah.
bad or hateful thoughts about other people, about yourself, about people. I refer back to like black magic, because people always think it's witches. Most of the time, people, all the black magic comes from ourselves. Half the time we're casting spells on ourselves by our thoughts.
Absolutely.
So
We're
that's good.
unaware,
Absolutely.
completely unaware.
So even like in my healing process, with Lyme and stuff, instead of being the victim and telling people I died in this way, or, I'm sick, I started saying, well, I'm currently healing, you
Hmm.
know.
Yeah,
If you
I like
change
that.
the narrative, to something positive. And it can just be little things. If your house is falling apart and you can't afford to fix it, plant a flower. You know, do something that that changes rearrange your furniture. I don't know, do so it's not stagnant energy, even in yourself. You know.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with you. I think that, you know, kind of going back to the cancer, was one of the things I really didn't. I'm much more aware now of what comes out of my mouth. I try to be. I'm not perfect, but I try to be much more aware of what comes out of my mouth, and the fact that I do control whether I'm putting out there growth and possibility, or whether I'm putting out there death to all possibility, or any possibility. So we're very much, you know, we can go a little deeper with that, into the concept that the air that we're breathing is the air that our ancestors breathed. To dip into the cosmology, the breath is what Odin gave us. So our breath is also a relationship with our gods, our ancestors, with the land wights, the trees, the spirits that are around us. And how do we honor that? You know, we honor it by, you know, tearing down other people. Do we honor it by singing? You know, what do we really do? And there's been a part of my healing practice that is very much about toning, and is about finding the right tone and projecting that into the person's body, wherever we're working with, to help break up some of the things that they're working on, to help heal. That the heart, the physical vibration of our voice can heal. It can uplift. It can cheer people up, and it can tear people down. And we just kind of tend to forget that the people around us are breathing our air as well.
Yes. And it's interesting. I was just thinking about that being winter and cold, you know, and everybody thinks it's kind of like Frozen, you know, the ice queen, the snow queen.
Yeah.
Winter is the only time you can physically see your breath.
Yep.
But I always tell people, when dealing, you know, when my kids are acting up, or my pets are acting up, or your reaction and control of your emotions, you know, how you react to things. So instead of us getting defensive and, you know, reacting in a negative way, I made a video about this a long time ago. Love harder in that moment, you know, love them more in that moment. Because when people are reacting or having negative emotions, they're lacking something.
Yeah.
So the worst thing we can do is, you know, negativity spreads like cancer, for that matter.
Yeah.
So that's
crazy
what the universe does to us, you know, like, so in that moment, love yourself harder, love yourself more, because that's what they do, you know?
Yeah. Yes. Wow. Well, thank you. I thank you so much for having me on, and letting me interview you, and you interviewing me. And
I was gonna say, they're telling us to wrap it up here.
I know, I just saw that. I'm like, hey, so thanks for having me.
Yes, thanks for
sorry,
being
guys.
here.
Sorry.
I would love to have you again in the future. We will
anytime.
Hopefully work together.
Yes.
Thank you again for Carnation, and you can catch me tomorrow on Chasing Prophecy, and with Flood from XV Planets next Monday. So have a good night, everyone. Thank you for listening, and we will see you again.